episode 8 of the WPG VTour 2021. Delighted to have our very special guest, Mr. Joseph Pereira, with us today. Joseph is an amazing composer and equally an amazing timpanist and percussionist. He is timpanist of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, currently directed by Gustavo Dudamel. And I've had the pleasure to work with Joe, and I know you're going to learn a lot from him. So welcome to Joe. Round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome, more than welcome. Great. So today Joe's going to go through a couple of things. We've got a piece called Sturm, which is by Bruno Hartel, performed by Elliot Gaston Ross. And then we're going to hear some Elliot Carter a little bit later by our very own Ashley Ridenhour. So we're going to start with Elliot first. But before we do that, we thought it'd be good just to show you a little bit about Joe's performing and also the commission that was involved with myself and with the LA Phil some time ago now. Was that January 2018, I believe?
Ages ago, yeah.
It was ages ago, but I remember the process taking probably 3 years. So that would have been 6 years ago. So yeah. Time flies. Time flies. Yeah. All right. So this is, do you want to say a little bit about the piece, Joe, first, actually?
Yeah. So this was a really exciting project. You know, Tim had contacted me. We had never met before about this idea of writing a concerto that would obviously feature the Maraca 2 percussion duo and timpani, specifically the principal timpanist from an orchestra that they would perform it with. So it was a really intriguing idea. My orchestra, we do a lot of contemporary music. We had a premiere already. This is our second week back. This last week we finished yesterday, and we had a premiere trumpet concerto by Steve Mackey already this past week. So we're doing a lot of contemporary music, and of course, my orchestra was totally on board to commission and support this project, which is amazing. And you know, the piece, I wanted to kind of incorporate sound from the percussionists and maybe some new sounds and new techniques, but also blend it with the orchestra. So it's not your typical traditional concerto where it's like a battle between the soloist and the orchestra. I wanted everything to kind of come together in this sometimes, you know, cohesive way and sometimes conflicting way. Kind of, you know, it was written at the time in my country where, you know, things were starting to get a little bit crazy with politics and this kind of feeling of, you know, uncertainty and all that. So that's, I have to keep in mind it was written, you know, back then in 2017, 18. So trying to reflect that. And you know, I actually spent a lot of time at the hardware store, and you'll see that there's some.
So did I.
Yeah, that's right. There's some like non-traditional instruments that they're playing on, and in the percussion section in the orchestra too, which you can't see so well, but you can hear it. Like ceramic tiles, you'll see some of that, which I found really fascinating because of the, you know, many overtones and cool colors you can get out of them from playing with different kinds of sticks, mallets, and also scraping with rocks on them. So you'll hear that. Yeah, so it was like a very huge collaboration between everyone in the orchestra and the soloist. So I was really grateful to, and it was a really special time for me, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, shall we show a little sneak?
Yeah, sure.
Review. So this is Threshold by Joseph Pereira. Wow, little trip down memory lane there. Yeah, that's. Do you know what that still haunts me? The vibes.
Oh yeah.
I think on the last one we actually performed this 4 times at Disney. I think the last time Gustavo got quite carried away, and then I was on my edge.
Yeah,
very
that
much so.
I'm often on the edge of them, yeah.
Yeah, very fun, very fun. Okay, great. So we're gonna just drop a few people out now so we can clear the screen a little bit. Bye, Ashley, for a little bit. See you guys in a little while. And we're gonna hear Elliot play a little bit of Storm first. I don't think Joe will probably hear the whole thing, maybe, but we'll if you want to give us a wave when you're ready to wrap up, Joe, then I'll stop it for you.
Yeah, I listened to the whole thing, and I've actually seen it before on the Trump page on YouTube a while ago. It's really fantastic performance, and yeah, I'll stop you. We don't have to do the whole thing.
Cool. All right, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, Elliot, it's really great. Can you tell us a little bit it, about the drums? I know we talked about it, of course, and I have some of those instruments I use often. But just so everyone can hear, can you tell us about the instruments, and also is the piece specifically written for Vienna timpani? I don't hear Elliot.
Sorry, I had my mic on mute. Sorry about that. I was just saying that these are traditional Viennese Hochreiner timpani with goat skins. Richard Hochreiner was the principal timpanist of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. And this piece was written by Bruno Hartl, who was the principal timpanist of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra up until 2016. And he wrote this piece to be played as part of the audition for his position for the principal timpanist back in 2016. And it's written specifically for 7 Viennese goatskin timpanis. Tuned at 7 different pitches. There's one tuning change involved. And the piece is called Sturm, which translates as storm. And it is, as it is, quite self-explanatory, to create the sound world like a storm. And the slow section is to imitate the calm eye of the storm. And it takes you on a journey through this sort of fast sections, and they're very articulate. It says, even with hard sticks, and it's sort of running through very rhythmical. And then there's 2 nice slow sections and the coda at the end.
Yeah, no, it's really great. I actually studied a little bit with, I don't know if you know the name Roland Altman. He was at the same time as Bruno. He's no longer alive, but I studied with him actually in Japan when I was at the Pacific Music Festival, which was started by Bernstein, but it's like a summer festival for college students. We auditioned for it, and Vienna Phil was there that summer. So luckily we had lessons, and I remember it was just really great. Very musical player and great teacher, and it was really eye-opening to me. It's the first time I actually saw the Vienna the Kaufman mallets he was selling. We bought them from him, and I still have them and I use them sometimes. But yeah, it's really great, and I have some, as we talked about, I do have some Vienna timpani that I use with the goat heads, which I absolutely love for certain repertoire. I always use them, and conductors love it every time I bring them out. Specifically for this piece, timpani solos are hard, I find. I mean, I even haven't even written one ever, because it's difficult for me, because I'm so used to playing in an orchestra, and I love the feeling of like supporting, blending, fitting into the sound, the big sound of an orchestra. And I generally use a German instrument, the Hartke timpani, which are kind of, can see them here, but these are the ones I use in the summertime with plastic heads. But most of the time I'm using calf or the Vienna drums with the goat heads in this hall, in our Disney hall during the year. But so timpani solo, you have to, I feel like you have to be very creative and show a lot of sound and character and color, which I think you did. The thing that I think that also really separates timpani solo music from percussion solo music, most percussion, is that, or I should say drums in percussion drums, is that there's pitch involved in timpani. So I feel like we have to be very careful, and I hear this a lot when people perform the Carter solos, which we're going to talk about after this, where we really have to distinguish the instrument with a pitch, right? Making the pitch is really clear. And I know the Vienna timpani have a very specific sound quality. It is a little bit drier, it is a little bit punchier. which again I love for certain things. I would say just think about, how can you make the pitches really distinct and really clear? Sometimes we want it to be more percussive, and there's certainly moments in this piece where it's a storm, so you want it to be very like thunder and a lot of character and bottom to the sound. But often I feel like the thing in the kind of always in my mind when playing timpani solo is just making the pitches really clear, so the melodic aspect really comes across, and technically, how do we do that? There was one, and maybe you can explain it. There was one part towards the beginning where it's like the 12th bar, I want to say, the 12/8 with the soft kind of triplet feel, where you're playing, your technique is kind of the sticks are hitting the drum at this angle, and to me, that's definitely a color you can use. It's definitely a sound, but to me, that in a way it kind of muffles the drum a little bit, and it may restrict the presence of pitch. You know what I mean? And again, if you're going for a certain color and sound, great. It's not that the rhythms aren't clear. Of course, the rhythms are super clear. It's just the quality of the pitch we lose a little bit. That's all.
Yeah.
So my technique is all like you may have seen in the video in the concerto. If you could have seen it, it's a little bit far away. But like I'm using a lot of wrist, and I feel like, and my stick, like the Kato sticks or European stick, this is my, signature model from JG Percussion. I don't know if you're aware of that, but this is more of a European thing with the it's kind of a counterweight. It's a little rubber piece here, counterweight. And what that does is it helps the stick come off the drum without me having to physically play like this all the time, so I can throw it as hard as I want and it comes off almost faster than I can pull it off myself. I mean, it's natural, like a bounce, like a ball. So I'm always thinking about this when I'm playing, because this, what I would call the snap, which we do naturally when we clap or when we bounce a ball, or throw a ball, this gives it the maximum amount of throw with the least amount of effort. So I'm always thinking about that, and that way I can stay relaxed, because these are big drums, and you can apply this to all percussion, I think, too. Just think about this. The instrument's there. This instrument wants to vibrate. So I'm not going to do anything to restrict that motion, restrict that resonance. I'm gonna allow it to. The snap happens at the right time, whether it's a big snap and a big motion for fortissimo or piano is here. Just like you'd bounce a ball, you'd only do that. You'd only do this soft or slow. Would be here, as opposed to big one forte, let's say, be there. So I'm using arm translation all the way to the wrist as the smallest muscle I use. So maybe think about, just that snapping motion helps a little. And again, if you play more this French, American, or more European, doesn't matter, German, it's the same concept for me. It's this snap. And I think you can apply that to all the instruments, marimba, everything, all percussion, even cymbal. I mean, I got a lot of this from my previous position. I was basically the cymbal player and assistant timpani in the New York Philharmonic, and I played a lot of cymbals, and it was a lot of thinking about that clapping motion, the projection, and that hall is not great. We had to play really big and forcing a lot to get the sound to be out in the hall, because everything kind of sounded compressed and softer than it really was. So I had to do a lot. I did a lot of restructuring and thinking about my playing. And really, it's like, you're putting a lot of like muscle tension into the sound. Same for timpani. And then when you make the contact, everything relaxes. So of course, in your piece here, things are happening fast. So you're not going to have a lot of time to think about this. But in general, if it can stay relaxed and you have that snap always happening, I feel like on timpani, especially, the pitch is really, be more successful a little bit. But the other thing, at the beginning, this is something I think about all the time, the rolls. I think this will help you in this piece also add even more. I mean, it's very dramatic and it's really great, but maybe a little bit more drama here and something to think about in general for rolling again on any instrument. Basically, when I see piano and I see a crescendo, I'm thinking this to this, right? And what did I do there? I changed the speed, right? Piano would be soft, slower, because that just looks soft, right? Like what looks soft? Does this look soft, or does this look right? I mean, you can see it. So I mean, I think that, and there is certainly a use for that. You know, I think of like Italian opera always has that like, you know, aggression sometimes in some of the roles, especially the louder roles at the end of a piece or an act. There's like this driving like tension. You know, if you want tension, then yeah, you're gonna roll a little bit faster. You're gonna put more notes in there. But I think in general, at this beginning here, I'm looking at the music. Sorry, at the beginning, instead of like, you know, ba ba bum bum ba ba ba, you know, maybe ba ba bum. You know, it's a lot like a wind player. When they have soft, they're always like less air, and as they crescendo, they're forcing more, you know, as they crescendo. So I think it's just the color. It's a nice color to add to your playing, I feel like. And you know, it helps define the dynamics a little bit better, you know. It's a little more driving to that high E flat and then down, you know, to the fortissimo, basically. I think. And then, you know, some of the soft rolls later on, you had some like diminuendos. I forget where it was. Yeah, you know, in the slow section, the first thing is, you know, I'm a fan. I'm more of a fan of, especially when I'm playing low notes, when I change pitches to make sure. Again, it's all about the pitch is like the king here. So I'm playing, and then I go from the F. I think it's F to the A flat, right? Yeah, you know, I would prefer to maybe hear that A flat from the beginning as opposed to the F kind of covering up the beginning, and then we hear the A flat later. You know, but only, you know, because I hear it all the time from the other instruments. I always tell my students, you know, you're going to spend the rest of your career simulating the other instruments. It's kind of true, you know, and sometimes they simulate the timpani sound, but you know, all the other instruments, whether it's definitely a brass or wind, you know, ba ba, there's always a clear start. Strings sometimes a little bit mushy in the start, but still you get a collective. You don't get the lower note hanging over and covering up the next pitch. So I like to. It doesn't have to be super clear. It's just like we hear the pitch again, like at the beginning of the rhythm. You know, we can't forget that rolls are still a rhythm. You know, there's still a beginning and an ending to those. And again, roll speed. You know, I would be like super slow on that first F roll, and maybe speed up a little bit to show. It also makes the A flat clear if I'm going, you know, into that with the speed of my stroke speed going into that. Another thing that other instruments do that's different is grace notes. They often play them a little bit more open than we do, let's say, on snare drum. You know, I never think of grace notes like this first one here in the 5/2 section as a flam on a snare drum. It's never played like that because there's pitches involved. You know, you can imagine like a clarinet would never go, you know, boom, like a flam, unless it was super fast music. But here, especially when it's slower and soft, it's more, you know, you can imagine the fingers playing bam, bam. So the grace note's always kind of at the service of the main note, which here is the F. So that, you know, again, it's about making the pitches clear, you know.
Yeah, also in this section, at the top of the page 3 with the A, actually you didn't hear it. It came in the second section now. But there's these fans that I was trying to sort of keep it lightweight and open in the flams, so not too tight together.
Yeah, no, it was pretty good. I just wanted to make a point that timpani, you always have to think about grace notes a little bit differently, more like the other instruments. It's not like a snare drum where it's super tight. I mean, generally the rule I find is like grace notes are kind of like played as a 30-second note in whatever tempo you're playing. That's generally a rule, if it's confusing when you get to a part with grace notes. Like if I'm playing something really slow and there's 3 grace notes, like it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, dig-a-da-dam. It's about that slow. I would never play like a snare drum where it'd be like rah, unless it's fast music, 1, 2, 3, 4, rah, then you have to fit it in there. But again, we're dealing with the pitch, and we want, even if it's on one drum and one note, we want to hear da-da-da-dam. We want to hear the pitch is really clear, always at the service of the main note. Yeah, and on one more thing, again, as far as clarity, I know you're using hard sticks, but when you get to, I took a little note here at the end of page 2. Yeah, we didn't really, did we hear that? No, we didn't really hear that, but it happened earlier too. When you have these fast 16th notes, like 4 notes in a row that switches between drums, but you have it at the end of page 2.
Yeah.
I would just, it's a little bit like the roll situation. I would just make sure to a little bit more classical mentality, and the first note really like point a little bit. So we have digga 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 digga, because I'm getting a little bit of a little bit muffled first note, da da da, and I'm hearing it like a little bit after instead of digga 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 da. Because I think when you change pitches, especially on big drums, these are bigger than most percussion instruments, like bigger than tom-toms, for example, they ring more, and I mean, especially if you're playing on probably the Vienna drums are the least ringy drums, I think, of course, because of the heads and the sizes. But, even those, like I think when you change pitches or change drums, there has to be a little more point on the first note. It kind of propels the clarity and pushes through the rhythm. Da 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 a little bit more.
Talking about the soft piano sections, the sort of Haydn type sections.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you were referring to this at the bottom of page 2, the semiquavers running down to the fortissimo, but that's not what you're referring to.
Yeah, that one too. I remember that because when I listened to it yesterday, I took a note on that. But but especially the first one, the Haydn type section, yes, for sure. It just reminded me of like exactly that, the Haydn like classical style. Which, if you think about it, timpani is always with the 2 trumpets in classical style. Beethoven, from Haydn to Beethoven, of course, and trumpet, you always hear like da 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 da. You always hear it very clear. And I mean, that's the thing I love about the Vienna drums when I use them. Is I don't have to work as hard as I do on the more modern instruments or my German instruments. It's just like I use the hard mallet and one pair of mallets, and it's like don't have to think too much. Just like the change is super clear. This is a style. I think just go for that a little bit more when you can. Because especially like it's a good contrast. You always have to think again. We talked in the beginning about like how can you create the illusion that there's maybe other instruments, it's not just solo timpani. Honestly, I'm a timpani player, right? And I don't want to listen to like when someone plays an audition for me or plays a lesson and they're playing Beethoven and it's just A and D. I don't really want to hear a timpani A and D. That's like bores me. That's just like boring, I want to hear like that moment in the Beethoven symphony. I want to hear the orchestra, the illusion of the orchestra. That's like the most exciting thing. So of course, with this solo repertoire in this piece, you're creating all these illusions, right? Of like the storm and whatever you want to do with it. It's totally personal and it's great. And you did a great job with it, I think, again. But like you can creating contrasts is really a great thing to do. You know, you have this dramatic opening, and you have more rhythmical stuff, and you have the slow section, and then if you have this hidden section, we call it the hidden section now, just
we call it that as well with my professor.
Yeah, so you know that's a contrast. Maybe all of a sudden it's like super clear, and sounds, you know, of course, different than the more open, dramatic, running up and down the instrument, fortissimo, you know, big, wild stuff, and then it's just like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to put a bit more pressure, like hold the stick a bit further up and put a little bit more pressure to try and get more articulation. But like you say, I think it could be even more pointed with the accents and everything. I was also trying to play it sort of right on the edge to get the clarity.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, the thing too that I always find is like the hardest thing about playing timpani is the instrument. It's a big instrument, right? You have the bowl, you have the head, and the instrument often does there's a lot that can happen, you know, with the sound. A lot of things happen that are somewhat out of our control, but we have to try to control it. So I think in that particular section, like really just, it's not so much like you have to change your technique or anything. I think it's just the mentality of thinking about that first note speaking really clear, the change of between the drums, bop, 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 you know, whatever note you're going to. That first note really sets it up so it's clear, you know. And of course, not too loud, because then it's going to cover up, that resonance will cover up the next second, third, and fourth note, of course. But you don't want to go too easy on the first note, because then it sounds like a little bit like, you know, and you want da 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 da. I think it just, if you find the right balance, it just makes it super clear. Yeah. But I mean, it's a really fantastic performance, and it's no surprise that you did well in that competition. It's really great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Elliot. So one thing we can't do on here is a decent round of applause, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
Nice one. Okay, great. So we'll just take it off for a bit. We're going to move over to Ashley now.
All right.
And she's going to be performing Canaries. If I just load this one up. Do you just want to talk for a minute about this one, Ashley?
Yeah, just like the piece itself, or
yeah, anything. Just while I'm queuing, but yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's so it's part of the 8 pieces, obviously, and it's based on a French Baroque dance with a lot of contrapuntal rhythms and meter changes.
Great. Have you played other ones or just this one?
This is the only one that I've really played. I've looked at March, but this is the one that I've mainly learned. Cool.
Yeah, I think we certainly will talk about this one. I've watched the video, but we'll watch a little bit so everyone can see it. It's not that long. We could just do the whole thing, and then I'll talk about it. I can also talk a little bit. I was telling Tim, I talk a little bit about Saeta and March, because there's a lot of similar ideas that run through all of them that I can mention, just so everyone has an idea of you know, the general concept of these and what he was thinking. I actually played, when I was a student at Juilliard, I played the Saeta and March for Carter when he was alive. He did a Masterclass, and he came, and a bunch of us played a few of these. So I can share some of that after, and we can talk a little bit.
All right, here goes.
I'll say to you too is, I'm just telling you guys things to think about, things that I've done, all these comments. I found with a year of teaching online during COVID, a lot of things get lost through the computer. So, just whatever I say, take it in the practice room and see if it helps or not, because it may not always be relevant because I'm just hearing it through the computer. Yeah, this is really great. There's a lot of things in Carter to talk about. I feel like these solos, they're often played not right, in my opinion. And again, we have to be careful about making them sound like making the pitches important and making it not sound like a solo for 4 tom-toms, which I hear often. I think you did a really good job. The only thing, first thing I have to ask you again, because it's probably again lost through translation a little bit. The mallets to me seem a little bit hard, but I know you have to get these really distinct sounds. Like I'm assuming everyone knows this or has at least seen the music. He notates, playing in the center, playing on the edge or the rim, he calls it, and the normal playing spot. And there's also dead strokes at some points. So we have to get these really distinct sounds. And he really wanted, with all of his pieces, when we have these different things happening either linearly or at the same time, like in the case of the march, we have things happening at the same time that are different. He studied at first with Ives, Carter. So, and he talked about that, and he talked about how he really wants to hear the real distinction. You have these two completely different things happening. Now here, of course, it's more linear. You start in the center of the drums and you play normal, play in the rim, you go back to normal. So we just want to get these 3 different grades of sound, really precise, or distinct, I should say. But precise as far as like working out your beating spots and working out like your technique. Like I feel like for the center, let me see if I can change it so you can see a little bit better here. For the center, to really make it more distinct, that's not going to work. Which is going to work? This one maybe over here. For the center, I really worked out when I could to maybe use more arm and maybe change my angle a little bit to get that real thuddy. Because obviously the center is going to be a deader, thuddier sound than a normal pitch. So maybe normal, I'm just going to get playing a normal spot, of course, and that's the easy one. And just get, but think about the pitch being like really resonant and clear. This one being dry and low and thuddy. Normal. And then for the rim, he really liked it extreme. This is where I think the harder stick kind of helps. Like harder stick is not as good color for the center because it makes it sound bright and kind of pingy, which you want that for the edge sound. For the edge, I really thought about like digging, of course, hitting that rim is not good for the instrument. It's not great. So I'm thinking about like hitting right up against the edge and almost like hitting inside, inside here. So digging in there to get to get rid of any, I know it's hard to be consistent about that. So it's something you have to practice. So maybe again, you change your grip, your fingers, something to grab a little more or whatever it may be, as opposed to this one where you're using no fingers, just like locking your wrist and getting that thuddy sound. Also, some people say, I don't want to hit directly in the center. I hit a little bit off the center is the right sound. It depends on your instrument, of course, but really finding those distinctions, I think, is really important and changing your technique if you have to make it work, so that starting with the sticks, the mallets, of course, for any piece, any instrument, finding the right mallet that makes your life easier is kind of the first step. So maybe, I don't know, maybe mess around with that a little bit. The other thing I know that's really important what's important to Carter is thinking about like cadence material. There's a lot of moments, especially right at the beginning, where it's kind of goes to the low E. It often happens in this piece, right? You find cadences where like phrases go instead of just like playing through it, you think about like ba-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum 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 bum. That's kind of a cadence in a way, imaginary cadence or whatever. But that's what he was hearing. So you find spots like that where you can really go. I think my next point leads me to the next point, the accents. I know they're in parentheses. And again, it may have just gotten lost a little bit through the computer, but I feel like they could be a little bit more, just a little bit more. Because then it kind of helps define, you have the main rhythm where you're playing all the notes that are printed, but then you have this secondary, again, typical Carter, Ives mentality of the secondary rhythm with the accents, which are a little bit more of like a phrasing accent because they're in parentheses. So to me, that's what that means. I'm thinking those as more as phrasing. I'm not really going to bring them out. But you have these almost like these two lines running together. So to do that, again, I think you need a little bit more flexibility in the wrist. A lot of things were like here. You can see in the video pretty clear, like, so in that way, when you're playing that way, it's kind of like this becomes your wrist. This is the flexible part. But this is not moving too much in here. So again, I feel like bum, ba-dum, bum. If I have a louder note, I'm going to let this come back a little bit more in this angle is really important for creating, clarity and projection and sound. Of course, you don't need like a huge sound here, but you need a little bit of a difference in color and sound, I think, for these phrasing accents. So it's a little detail, but I think it makes kind of a big difference, So think more about that snap and hitting the drum from a little bit different, this opening up a little bit more for some of these accented or different notes. You always want to get like different colors on the instrument, as much as you can. He uses this thick line. It looks like a legato, but it's actually like more of like a piano notation, I would say. It's a tenuto. It's a tenuto line, which means like full duration of the note. So like when you have this on the second line, or you have it on the end of the first line, but in the second line, it's a change of character, which means a change of stroke. Maybe for me there at that forte, I'm starting talking to the, where I am the second bar of the second line, starting at that forte, you all of a sudden have this slower music, tenuto on every note. So for me, I'm going to use probably, my thinking is the slowest possible strokes and heaviest stroke speed I can get away with without changing the tempo, because you can play, bum, 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 right? Or you could go bum, 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 bum. It makes a difference in how the drum speaks, and it keeps it a little bit fuller if the speed and the weight's a little bit more and the speed's a little bit slower. So that, that's a color thing you could change maybe. We talked about that. In some of these dead strokes. So that section right there that I'm talking about right now, he also liked the idea of like, all of a sudden it's like orchestral. There's like these big moments. These here in this piece, I feel like it happens really quick. Like there, for example, you're playing along with this bum 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 bum. It's like again, it's more linear. It's like you're playing chamber music and you're getting all these different colors, and then it's like opens up. It's like all of a sudden, boom, big orchestral sound, then it's small again. This happens in the march at the beginning. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but the other thing that helps Carter in general in these solo pieces is tempos. I feel like they're a little more successful and easier for us to get all these things in if you start at just a tiny bit slower than printed. It doesn't have to be at dotted quarter equals 90. You could cheat and just do a tiny bit slower, and then it makes everything super clear. It's a strange timpani thing. I don't know. It's even with like orchestral excerpts. I always think it always has to be a little bit slower. Something about the projection, and it takes time for the instrument to speak, especially this. This is like you got a lot of stuff going on here, and I think it would help. It's nothing egregious, just a hair slower makes everything super clear and also a little bit easier. So obviously, he's famous for, in these pieces in particular, the metric modulations. And he explained this like you're driving a car. Now it'd probably be an older car, a stick shift where you're shifting gears, and it has to be very smooth. So you're in first gear, and without even knowing it, we're in second gear. And then we're in third gear and so on. And we go back to first gear. But it's never like this jerking, thing, which would probably be, if I had to drive a car like that now, it would be completely like that, jerking around. But the way to do that is he talked a lot about preparing these modulations. So how do you prepare? If you look at kind of the big one on the second page, and he gives you some accents often to show you it's coming, or to bring it out. That's like kind of his way of making it fail-proof. But it actually starts earlier, on the second page. You could technically argue that it starts, the modulation that goes to the in the middle of the page there, the quarter note equals 144. He gives you a bunch of accents before to show you it. It actually kind of starts on the third line, right? In the third bar. B, E, B, E, F. So that these pulses kind of start, and definitely at the 6/8. Just to make that shifting really fluid and smooth, as it goes, and all of a sudden we're just in this new tempo. We don't even know it, it just kind of feels more natural. That section there, I think maybe just a little less. It was a little bit stiff here, just playing the Fs, showing this. I think maybe the movements could be a little more fluid. The F to the C, right? Just kind of a rebound off, because you're. Yeah, I think it would just help the fluidity of it a little bit. Just think about that. Think about when you play a percussion setup, piece. When you're playing something over here and you have to jump over there and you're jumping back and forth, you wouldn't throw it here, then here. That movement I feel like, for timpani, for me especially, I always say the movement should really line up with the speed of the music you're playing. If I'm playing something super slow, I'm not gonna be waiting and then, quick like this. It'd be, more fluid, and to me that creates really the special musical character. I would call it rhythmical character. You could clap out this piece. You can clap all the rhythms on your hand, but there's really no rhythmical character. You're just playing the right rhythms. But think about if you play it on timpani or you play the rhythms on a different instrument, it has a completely different rhythmical character. So we have to think about that as far as our motions, right? And our speed of the stroke, whether it's quick, staccato stroke, fast music, or slower, or the tenuto, I'm feeling a little bit more to keep the note longer, So again, creating these illusions, I think are really important. At the end, I kind of lost the momentum of the crescendo, just that last line on the B and C sharp. I feel like you're going, and the last one can be even more, right? Just keep it going, because again, you want to create that contrast where you're going let's say you're at forte or fortissimo there, or even if you're just at forte, you're at a good forte, then you have this last little piano thing coming, reminding us of the beginning. And so I like that contrast would be good if you could do that. And the ending. Sometimes endings we have to help composers a little bit. I feel like the ending could be more convincing. If there was one thing, if I could only say one thing about your performance, it was really great. The one thing I would say is like the ending could be more convincing. That's it. That was the biggest thing for me. So maybe make more out of that last gesture, and then the last note. I've seen people grab like bigger mallets. Maybe you've thought about this too. I had like another pair of mallets here. Actually, someone one time grabbed like bass drum mallets because I thought it was a little bit too soft, but it was big. Something different maybe, and just a little more punch and a little more sound to make it final, a more dramatic ending, because it is marked SFF. The S is, I don't know if technically, but it's kind of implying the sforzando, and people often forget, sforzando is like the literal translation of that word is forced, like you're forcing it. Think about sound, like, okay, if I tell you to play a note, that low E on timpani, and force it, like, what does that mean? Well, you're gonna play it like fast. You're gonna like try to push the sound out pretty quick, and so we can use that there for that color, and it has the stem going up and the stem going down. So what does that mean? Means two hands at the same time. We actually just played Mahler 4 last week and yesterday, and there's a spot, in the third movement, the climax of the symphony and probably the whole piece, the big timpani moment where you're playing an E, a B, and a C sharp, bum 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 bum, and it's marked the same exact way with the note head and the two stems, but I don't play them exactly at the same time because it just sounds terrible on the drum. It fights the head. So I'm playing them at the same time, but one slightly lower, and they're slightly flamming, but we shouldn't hear two notes. We're just hearing one fat note, So I could just use more of that at the end there. That's all, Whether you want to delay it or you want to play it right in time, it doesn't matter. It's just all about the pacing. Getting to that last note and playing it bigger. I think that's the first step. Just try to go for a bigger note there, and maybe mess with grabbing another mallet or something. I don't know, But yeah, really great. Overall, the performance is really great. Makes it clearer. Yeah. So. Any questions about that, or any thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess like you're talking about the shifting gears, starting sooner.
Yeah.
What's one kind of like suggestion for? You kind of talked about the beginning of the 6/8, both hands going from the right hand F to C and then the left hand B to E.
Yeah.
So that preparation, I feel like you explained that to me, but the 5/4 first line of the second page, would you say that starts like the 2/4 bar of the second page?
Yeah, totally. That's the thing. That's the cool thing. You can go back and like find almost like where he was planning on, where he's planning on the new modulation that's coming, but you go back and find where it really starts. And sometimes he doesn't have the accents right away, but it's still there. It's still like building up to that. And I feel like his putting in the accents kind of makes it fail-proof for the performer. Like, okay, now even if you don't prepare it really, you're gonna prepare it enough to make it smoother than it would have been otherwise. So yeah, I go back and look for those clues where I can, at least even if I'm not accenting and bringing it out, I'm aware of it. So my time is solid, and getting into that so it's smoother. Another thing I did, because like the March in Saeta used to be like asked on auditions a lot. like when I was your age, and actually for my LA Phil audition, I had to play the march. But all auditions, college auditions, festivals, sometimes they were asked. There was a period where they were asked all the time. And what I used to do also to make sure, because once you get off on a modulation, and the rest of the piece is kind of can be funky, or you just have to just like skip ahead and jump on to the right correct tempo if you get off. So I would practicing these. I would like, of course, the beginning 90. Okay, play a little bit and then stop, check with the metronome, then jump to the next section, which is a different feel, but it's still the same speed of 90. Play that. But like the 120 at the 6/8 at the bottom of the first page, I would just cold play that and then turn on the metronome and make sure, like, basically you're memorizing the speed so you can, know where you are when you get there and feel comfortable about those changes, and it winds up being smoother, I think, in the long run. But it's really cool because you can look for these clues. They're all over the place where you can do these, prepare these early, at least mentally. And of course, look for the cadences. It's not always on E, but sometimes it goes to the high F. But look for those, and you can bring those out a little bit, And then the orchestral sections, you can feel like you can breathe a little bit because it's just like big and open and fun, and then you go back to like the hard noodling stuff, Yeah, it's great though. It's really great performance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. Great. What do you want to do, Joe? Do you want to bring everyone in the room and see if anyone else has got any timpani-related questions? Or do you want to talk a bit about March? Or do you want to go on to the film music? It's your call.
Yeah, let's take a little break and see if anybody has any questions about anything that we've done so far.
All right. There we go.
Or
Any
I mean,
questions?
a lot of people. I mean, at least here in the U.S., a lot of people know and play the march and saeta. So if you have any specific questions about those, I can go into more detail with those. March in particular has got a lot of interesting stuff, but anything related to timpani or what we talked about, we can talk.
No questions. I wouldn't mind you talking about March for a little bit, actually, because I played this at college, just for a bit of nostalgia.
Yeah. So, the march. I mean, it has this typical, Ives Carter thing where you have, it's right from the beginning. You have the march in the left hand playing the C and the G and the C, which is the low drum and the third drum. You're playing this really, staccato bum 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 bum, and in the right hand you have the high E, which has the tenuto mark, which is just this separate rhythm and different technique. Bum, bum, really slow, really heavy, as if it's like full singing duration. So you have these two different things going on. Snapping and like really full in the right hand. So it's takes a little bit of time to work that out.
Yeah.
And right away in the third bar, you have this like little explosion, soloistic thing. You're going along, bum 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 bum, bum 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 bum. So it's linear. You have this march thing, then you have this crazy soloistic, which he explained, which really was really cool. At the time he wrote this, he was going to like Latin jazz club in New York. And this was like the timbali solo. It just comes out of nowhere. So it's almost like out of tempo is okay. I mean, I wouldn't do that, but so you're going bum 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 dum dee dum bum ra ba 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 bum bum ba bum 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 ba ba, and then it happens again in the fourth line. Bum 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 ba bum 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 bum, and then again the 1 2 3 4 5 fifth line. Yeah, dig it again. Bum 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 bum, and that's the modulation actually, which starts way earlier. You can find that from the tenuto markings. It has this dotted eighth note pattern that's part of the march that becomes a new tempo dotted quarter or quarter note equals 140 in the 4/4 section. So yeah, it's interesting. There's these like linear thoughts that are completely different. It's almost like schizophrenic, but then it goes back and it comes back, and they go back and forth. So I found that to be really interesting. As far as approaching it, I don't have to be so careful and precise about everything, rhythmically lining up with this. It's more of a character element, which adds really a cool effect. Technically, he has these 30-second note triplets between the hands. On one hand is got the butt end, and the other hand has the mallet. It's a 30-second notated triplet on the last 16th note of a beat, let's say, or on a downbeat. I mean, the way I approached that was I just really played normal spot and really opened it up like a grace note type feel, because he does have grace notes written the same way, but they're written as grace notes, so they're really tight. And the way I approached those is I just played those closer to the edge to just make a distinction, a distinction in the sound. The thing about sticks, he really likes because when I did this when I was in school, they had just come out with those timpani mallets that had half the mallet was felt and the other half was like wood, exposed wood.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But I played it with those because then you don't have to flip the stick at all. You're just using the wood and you're turning it. And he didn't like it at all. He didn't like it at all. He wanted the sound of the sound of the stick on the head versus the regular mallet. So not too hard of a stick. This one's probably too soft. Not too hard because you don't want it to sound like wood, but you want a clear difference between a regular mallet and the wood. So he liked, and I probably wouldn't use these, or I'd have to move this rubber part to get more wood on there. But he liked the sound, the stick sound a lot. So I would never use one of those mallets that you can flip around, just because I heard it from the source. He liked that. So
yeah.
And it makes this first modulation section tricky because you're playing bum bum bum, well, I'm playing here bum 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 bum, flipping bum 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 bum, flipping whoa bum, so there's many ways to do that. For some reason, when I was younger, I would just flip them and it was fine. But like we talked about before, we're getting old. I don't know. I can't do it anymore. When I took LA, I kept like dropping it. And I kept fumbling it like I just did. So my solution was to do this. You can do this.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. And I'm exactly the same. Like when I was at college, I was flipping, but I think I would do what you just did now for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot safer.
Yeah. Especially
for old people. So, yeah.
But it adds a little bit more adrenaline, doesn't it? If you're flipping, like you might drop it, sort of thing. So,
yeah,
for sure.
For sure.
A bit more danger.
Yeah. Yeah, and for example, like this one's marked starting at quarter note equals 105. I did it maybe at like 102, just like a hair slower.
Yeah.
Just everything like lays a little bit better. And again, in this piece, you have like the orchestral section. You have like a little waltz here in the second page. Bum 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 bum, bum 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 bum, and then bum 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 bum. Orchestral section at the end here. The slower notes, the big notes. So again, it's like similar threads running through these pieces, which I think we have to consider. The what else can I say? The muffling at the end, this whole the recap or coda where it's kind of similar to the opening, except you have muffles that you have to, while you're playing, you have to flick on the drums. He wanted that like super muffled, like again, real contrast to the notes that are ringing and the ones that are muffled. So I see people now have these ones that are cloth that are rolled up with a magnet like goes, where can I do this? Like you have a magnet like on the edge with the muffles, and the muffles like that long maybe, but it's rolled up, so they just like flick it and it goes out. I used to have music stands, one here, one between the two low drums and the two high drums, and then I would just like flick the muffle on. You want to get it like not in the center because it's still gonna ring. You want to like have it more obviously he wanted it just like really dry. Again, to create that contrast. It's all about the contrast of two different things happening at the same time.
Mm. I've got to admit as well, I don't really know the other movements as well as that one, but like listening to Ashley just now, there are quite a few similarities. Like some of the ideas are actually taken. I don't know if that's a running theme, if any of the ideas are in any of the other movements, or it's just that one I heard. But
yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of similarities. A lot of things you can use.
There's themes that recur.
Yeah, these basic things are like they run, especially the modulations they're all prepared beforehand, and they're all they should be smooth. Again, like driving the car, he explained like first gear to second gear, it's like very smooth. Third gear, fourth gear, back to second gear, like very smooth. It shouldn't be this like jerking rhythm. Like nothing is a dramatic change except for these character elements and these different colors. They are very different. Can be contrasting. The very end too of the piece, it basically does a diminuendo to a roll, and I hear some people actually do a buzz roll, which is fine. I always just like the sound of coming from 16th notes, 3-ienda, 4-ienda, and like fading out. So I'm more of a fan of the single stroking the end of the roll, even though at an audition you may be nervous and it may be hard. It's very delicate, but I don't think it's a big deal. I think it just like ties it all and fades it out, and that's it. Again, it's a performance, right? It's like solo. You can show like there's no historical real reference or other instruments that you have to simulate or another music that you're playing as part of. It's just you, and it's just this piece. So I feel like you can take more liberties and show a lot of character with especially with these, but with all solo music,
Yeah, great. So I've got one question for you. Torrell's now here. He can ask it himself. I was going to ask it, but he's actually here. So do you want to ask your question, mate?
Yeah, sure. So hi, by the way, it was really interesting. Although I've just appeared now, like I've been listening to the class. I was just wondering, after having like read your CV and everything, like how do you manage to balance being a composer, orchestral timpanist, orchestral percussionist at the same time? Like it kind of seems like three people's lives worth of things.
Yeah, I mean, it can be crazy. I mean, I kind of like it. I always say like I try not to separate. People often put you in a box. You're a timpani player. That's all you do, or you're a composer. So you must write because you're a percussion player. You must write only percussion music, or you must write this kind of music. It's like not really like that, and I'm teaching a lot too, that is also important to me. And they all kind of like, to me, they all relate to each other. I may hear something in the orchestra in a Beethoven symphony that I've never heard before. And I go and write it down, just write a note to myself, and it may become a piece for Glocken and clarinet. I don't know, it may influence something else. So I kind of let everything kind of go together in a way, I do a lot of contemporary percussion playing because my orchestra has a new music series. So I often get to play on that, which is great. And composing is not like something that I do or you do every single day and you have to put in hours of doing, it comes in spurts, and it's often focused on when you have a project that you have to do, but then, and same thing with playing. We just had a crazy 2 weeks because we're first time back playing with the full orchestra in the hall since COVID. So, the full audience, and it's just been like a lot of extra rehearsals and concerts. So of course some things have to wait a little bit, but yeah, find a way to make it work.
Okay. So just by pure brute force then. You managed to find,
a lot of coffee, Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much.
Sure.
All right. Anyone else? No.
Yeah, I would like to ask something.
Yeah.
I would like to hear about how you first started playing and how you not originally, how you ended up playing the timpani. Just from interest, because uh, we had the talk last masterclass, I think, that so most of the percussionists are usually starting from drum set. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in that because I'm finding myself like not enjoying timpani that much, and I really would like to know why you took it as your job and why you really uh, fell in love in it, because it's something that I really would like to try and get in and find maybe
Yeah.
my niche in it.
Yeah, that's a good brings up a topic, I think. Um, when I was in school, I mean, I just wanted to be, competent and like at a good level for everything I did. Like if the teacher assigned me to play in a wind band or in the orchestra to play triangle or to play timpani, I just always wanted to have a certain for myself a certain standard. So sometimes I wasn't comfortable, but I never wanted to show that. I wanted to always be at a certain level. So and when I was in school, we definitely had like a lot of different directions people were taking. Like some people were like only playing solo repertoire and only studying that with their teacher. Some people were only playing timpani. Some people were only playing orchestral. So it's very different. And I kind of found, of course, eventually, of course, you have to specialize. I think, of course, you have to. But I always found it a little bit strange. I remember when I was on faculty at Juilliard, somebody who was really great soloist, like playing all the complicated repertoire and playing really well. And part of the requirements for the the exam at the end of every year was you had to play 4 mallet excerpts on xylophone or glockenspiel, and like this guy couldn't play it really. It wasn't good. Which when you hear him play the solo repertoire, it's way more complicated what he played and really amazing. And then these really simple, glockenspiel excerpt, he couldn't really get through it that well. So it was like, to me, that's strange, So where I teach now at USC, at University of Southern California, we actually make everybody in the studio. We have 10 students. And this was my idea for the school when I started there in the studio. Everybody studies 1 week with me, and then next week they study with my colleague who's a percussionist in LA Phil, Jim Baber. So we're keeping like percussion playing and timpani playing at a very high level, or I should say the same level. We also have a marimba teacher, Naoko Takato, who's a Yamaha artist. She comes and she studied with Keiko Abe, so she has all these exercises and routines that they go through from marimba to be also at a solo marimba, a certain level, We also have everybody studies 1 year with Peter Erskine, just like, even if you've never played drum set, just basic drum set, because now, orchestras want to save money or jobs, gigs. They don't want to sometimes hire a separate person to play drum set. It's part of your job sometimes to do that. So just trying to be inclusive, and bring all the instruments, to a certain level, I think is important. As far as me, I always had an interest in timpani, not so much because I love the instruments, because I love the repertoire and I love the music. That's what really made me, even when I was younger in high school, I would stay after the classes and have like my back then was a cassette tape, with the Walkman, we called it, with the headphones, and I'd play along to the symphonies. It was probably terrible, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was the same thing when I was younger, and I first played drum set, like you said. I played a lot of drum set, and I played drum set all the way through college and bands to make money, and I recently just got a drum set at home, which my wife is not that happy about, but it's fun. I'm getting back and playing a little bit more. But drum set and timpani are very similar. I feel like if I didn't have that drum set background, I feel like I may not be the same player, because there's a lot of similarities in rhythmically. I mean, it's very different rhythmically. Sense of time in an orchestra versus playing in a small group with drum set, or jazz group. But it's a similar mentality.
You do think, because from my point of view, when I divide the percussion world, it's maybe not that true, not that right to do it. But when I look at the percussion instrument, I divide it in my head for mallet playing, vibraphone, and marimba, and that word, and multi percussion, normal skin drums, which is snare drum, and drum set that I feel like has a lot of similar technique. And timpani is a whole different world for me. The approach to timpani sound, and as you said, time and feel of orchestra is really different from a jazz group or a solo piece. And I really find that in the few times that I'm doing it, in my school, we have to play in the orchestra. And I really pay my respects to the guys who like to play timpani and not touching it, because it's not. I've always felt like it's not my department, and
that's okay too. If you just don't like it, that's fine. That's totally fine. But I would suggest maybe, thinking about the music and how you fit in. That's how you find the sound. The sound must always fit into whatever we're playing. I'm not so concerned with I have to use this type of mallet all the time. This is my mallet. I have to use this. I mean, I have my line of timpani mallets are made for me, and sometimes I don't use them. Sometimes I take them apart and re-sew them for what I think I need for a certain sound.
Yeah, cool.
But as far as drum set, in a way it's similar, because you're kind of often like the guy that holds a lot of things together. In an orchestra, they often say you're the second conductor, which is kind of silly because no one's watching me. But I always feel like I have to play my instrument in a way that's making it easier for everyone else to play. Not only volume, but the placement of time. Am I placing it a little bit heavier later? Am I playing more in front? Am I going to lead? Am I going to blend? I'm always thinking about these things more than I'm thinking about my actual, what I'm doing here and how it sounds here. I'm not thinking about that as much. So in that way, it's this communication, because you're I'm kind of like the first person in the line to directly translate what the conductor does. Conductor does this, and I play. If I have a note, I play based on what he does. So in that way, to me, I feel it's similar to what I understand as drum set. The thing that's funny though is recently going, because when I was younger, I just played for fun, and I just learned music, listened to it, play along, play rock, play jazz, whatever. Never really taking time to actually study it, and use the books, to write books, and work on technique and independence. And now that I come back to it later, I realize the biggest difference between what we do and drum set is, for drum set, you have to play either your hands or your feet exactly at the same time. And to me, it was it took me a while to get used to that, because I never do that. Even on marimba, on timpani, I never play exactly at the same time, because we're always thinking about voicing and the pitch that's involved. And I'm like a piano, I'm always playing maybe the high note a little bit louder than the other hand, a little bit more, or a little bit open, a little bit slightly flam, so the sound is like bigger, So to me, that was really strange when I first sat down to try to play. It sounded terrible. It's been a while, but like just playing the hands together or playing your left foot and your right hand at the same time was like, I felt like a complete idiot. Like I couldn't do it for a while,
Yeah. All right.
There's definitely differences, but the mentality for me is very similar. And I'm glad I actually had those experiences playing a lot of drums, because it just helps me with confidence. It's like you're the only player back there, just like you're the only drum set player, and you have to lead when you have to lead, or you have to know when to make it smoother and blend. So, I mean, yeah, I love it. But for me, again, it's the music, and there's some music I used to hate. Like at first, I didn't like Bruckner at all. I didn't understand why it was so long. Why do we have to sit here for so long? Why are there only 2 cymbal notes in the whole piece? Sit there and wait forever.
Yeah.
Now I love it. The more I study it, the more I like it, and I like the music.
I definitely not hating on anything, but yeah, I can relate. Thanks.
Rather ironic considering Elliot's at the Bruckner University.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I think
for
the final sort of little part of this section, Joe was going to talk a little bit about film music and recording, because obviously the LA Phil are very closely connected with the film industry, obviously Hollywood being sort of the hub for that. And there's opportunities everywhere. I mean, even like we did your concerto, Joe, and completely by chance, someone in the audience was a film producer and asked us to write some music, which we did. I mean, ended up not going anywhere actually, but there are opportunities at every point where you live, aren't there? So it's definitely a buzzing part of the world for that. So I'm looking forward to just getting a bit of an insight into, what your role is sort of maybe with the orchestra and how things work a little bit, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate. There's guys that moved to LA hoping to break into the recording scene, and there are guys that have done that. It's a handful of people that only do that for a living. They're working all the time. Of course, all like the big studios are here. Fox. You see at the beginning of the movie or the end. The major movies, Fox and Sony, Warner Brothers, of course. Warner Brothers is the closest one to us. But yeah, really, actually, it doesn't have anything to do with the LA Phil. It's just like a separate gig.
Oh, okay.
That I get called for once in a while.
Okay, I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah, the LA Phil, we did do. We did record West Side Story. There's going to be a new West Side Story. Bradley Cooper is going to be Bernstein. He's actually comes to our rehearsals a lot. I see him in the audience because he's basically studying. He lives here, obviously, and he's just studying, Dudamel and conductors and how they move. Actors do that, right? They have to get into the role. So he's been studying. It looks like a lot. Yeah, that's the one we did with the LA Phil, which was fun. It was all from the rewritten, of course, but similar licks. And there were some other guys. Luis Conte and Alex Acuna was there. I often see them when I go. I just did one. There's a new Disney movie. I don't know if you know Coco. It's a Mexican theme. There's a new one coming out. It's Colombian theme, but Alex was there. So I see some of these like legends that I grew up listening to, even like Peter, who teaches at USC, which is amazing. I often get to see them and work with them, which is still unbelievable. But some of these I get called, and it comes randomly in spurts. Like I'll get called a lot and then I won't get called for a while. And if I can do it, if I'm not working here at the orchestra, I can do it, which I feel really fortunate and lucky to do. And there have been some pretty big ones I've done. Like I've done all the Frozen movies, which my girls are really excited about. I played on Creed a bunch, which for me was like a dream because it was like the new Rocky, Basically, he was in it. It's a modern version. And I don't know if you know the Mandalorian, the Star Wars series. I played a lot. I played all the snare drum on the first season of that. Yeah, a lot of this stuff like I forget about, and the movie comes out, and I don't even remember that I played on it. Somebody just texted me about a Matt Damon movie they saw, and they said, "Oh, your name was at the end in the credits." It's like I don't even remember doing that. Yeah, because it's so like, you know, a lot of times I'm going in and doing the last day or one day, and I'm playing a lot of percussion, so it's like a whirlwind, and you're just going, and you're reading music. But lately, I've been called to do more timpani stuff, which has been fun and stressful in a different way because you have to work out the tunings quickly, and usually for that I usually get the music beforehand, like a few days before, because I need to know how many timpani I'm going to send. Typical, and I'm going to show you an example in a second. The typical like studio setup is to have 6 drums, an extra 32, because they write a lot of low notes in movie music, often a lot of low notes. I almost never use like my high drum. I mean, I bring it, but I almost never use it. Instead of where the 4th drum is the high drum, I have another 3rd drum, like another 26 or a 25-inch drum. And then the 23 inches like up there, but I hardly ever use it. Like I said, it's mostly like the low 3 drums, sometimes the 4th drum, but usually like D and lower is like most of the music. And that's what I'm doing. And I have a set of atoms that I use for that, because that's what all the other big guys use that do most of the timpani stuff. John Williams' brother, Don Williams, is a timpani player, and he plays on a lot of the big movies. And he has like 11 drums that he uses, Ludwig's, so all plastic heads, because it's just easier to stay in tune and records well. And it totally, for me, it's always, when I don't do it for a while, it's a little bit adjustment period at first. It's a little bit strange because I have to play differently. Generally you can't play with like a big orchestral sound because the mics are here, usually 2 mics or one big one over, and they just want like the really clean, pure sound. So I'm using often like hard mallets, a smaller core, like this is like probably the go-to. It's a leather stick, but it's a little bit bigger, so it's not so hard, and it's light. So even for rolling, even for doing rolls, I'll use this stick because again, it has like just a smaller, thinner, slimmer sound. Not this big, open orchestral sound. I almost never use like a big felt stick. It's a lot lighter, a lot of like smaller movements, and just like keeping it really clean and precise. And that's also the reason for bringing extra timpani. I mean, I would prefer to pedal a lot of stuff. It just keeps it more, for me, easier, to less ringing, less what I would call choreography. If I'm pedaling over here and then I have to pedal over here and I'm going to have to play, I might miss something. I'd rather just like in the orchestra, I just pedal it. It's easier and I'm done, and less ringing. But, there's a lot of extra, sometimes noise, and a lot of maybe not as accurate as having everything set up and you just play the notes. And often, in the studios, it's not straight through. You may do a few bars at a time just to get that section really clean. So it's a totally different mentality, and it can be really fun. Like sometimes a lot of, especially in percussion, there's a lot of creativity. Like I played Tenet. Tenet was a movie that was made for IMAX only. I don't know if anyone saw it, because it came out right at the beginning of COVID. They were really kind of upset about that because it was meant only for IMAX. There's a lot of effects. But I spent a whole day at the composer's studio with a colleague, and we were just like improvising on and I remember I was playing like metal pots and cookie sheets and throwing chains, and it was really fun, just like experimenting. And he wanted certain like kind of industrial type sounds, and
So it sounds like that's how it works quite often, just sort of experimental, because that's sort of down the Reitman route as well, wasn't it? Like, wasn't quite sure of the sound, and then it's like, that's it, that's the one.
Yeah, not always. I mean, we get like music, which again we can show you in a second. We there's often music to read, but sometimes they go off script and they say, oh, also can we just do that? Get another take of that, and everyone play piano, even though the whole thing has dynamics. We just want to take where everything's soft, or we just want to take where you, instead of playing triangle, you play a crotale note or whatever. Instead of Glock, play crotales. They may do that, but when there is some creativity, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, in timpani, it's not so much. It's more just dynamic changes and maybe harder sticks sometimes, but that's pretty straight ahead. Yeah, but it's fun. So I can't share so over COVID, they did something really cool where they my wife's a violinist too in the orchestra, and she does a lot of these sessions too, movie sessions. They did a lot of home recording to keep musicians employed, which is pretty awesome. So they basically would send you either a Pro Tools or a Logic file, and I already had Logic on my computer, so I went with that, where it had the whole session, all the music, the click track. We're always playing along with a click track, which is another thing that takes me a while to get used to, because again, we talked about it before in the orchestra, like things are flexible. I'm not like, the time is not like a drum set where it's like you're playing exactly. And even that sometimes is flexible, but this is even more flexible with 100 other musicians. You have to, violins, the strings always have a little bit of a delay in the attack, and whereas brass maybe is a more immediate attack, so you're going to push a little bit. But with the studios, you're hearing things around the orchestra a little bit later, and normally I would go with that, but you have to stay with the click that's in your ear that's like pushing ahead. So it's a little bit disorienting at first for me. So we got these sessions, and they have the click track on one line. They have the MIDI mock-up of like your part, the timpani part, or the percussion part. They have the MIDI mock-up of the whole piece of what it sounds like, and then you can record whatever your final take. So I would do it a few times and try to get my best take, and I have a microphone. So it was a whole new COVID experience, getting microphones and learning how to do audio and set levels and the right balance for everything. Yeah, it was, and now it's a skill we can use. But yeah, that was a whole like scary learning curve that I knew nothing about beforehand. And now I'm basically like the audio engineer for my wife every time she has one, because still is afraid to touch it. So I have to go in and do it. But yeah, we can, Tim, if you want to share that music.
Yeah, I'm going to share that page you sent me, if I can find it. Hopefully this is the right one. Is that the right one?
Yeah.
You see that?
So I blocked out the title, but I probably technically.
Is that big enough? Let me see if I make that bigger. Is that any better?
Yeah, I think we can see that good enough. So this is from like a pretty popular not a movie, a TV series here in the U.S. On a pretty big streaming service. That was like the first thing I did during COVID on my own. And I'll play the file in a second, but so you can hear what I was hearing and what I added. But yeah, I use this one because it's a typical and this is not that complicated. They can be a lot more complicated and a lot more low notes. And low notes, I mean like that low D at the end. So sometimes you'll have a D, a C sharp, and E flat like right up against each other, and you have to kind of navigate that down in the lower part if you're in setup. But and sometimes you need another 29-inch or another 32. It depends. But that's why we get this right before we can send what we need to the session. But you can see here. So I have I should have wrote my tunings in. So on the standard set of 4, I'm going to have the low F sharp and then a C sharp and an F sharp, maybe an F sharp on the high drum. I wouldn't put that on the third drum. And you have some bars to change your tuning in the 4-bar rest. But the ending is what's interesting and what's typical, what I have to do. You know, I almost would never play a fortissimo D natural on my high on the what I would call the fourth drum, which is out to my right, you know, or if you're German, out to your left, German system. But that drum is now another third drum, so like a 26-inch or a 25-inch timpani. So it sounds good. It's just a little disorienting to be playing that up there. So I have the low D on my low extra 32, which is way out behind me, and then the G, then the A, then the C, and then the D going up. So, you know, I'm kind of stretching out a lot, which is a little bit awkward, but that's what you have to do to make that work without pedaling everything there, because it just goes by kind of quick. And obviously, you know, we got some rhythm here, and it's fortissimo. And then what does it say there? I actually have a part here I can see better. It says all marked on the triplet at the end there. So to me, that means I'm going to just grab my leather stick and just kind of like really punchy sound without killing the drum or without playing like a real fortissimo like I would in real life in an orchestra situation, unless they ask. Sometimes they ask for it to be really normal and big. But in general, I err on the side of just getting like a clean, you know, recording quality for them to have. Let me play it for you. I think you can hear it. I'll play the whole thing first, so you can hear everything that I'm hearing, plus my parts in here. There it is. Just tell me if you can't hear it. Yeah, I'll skip ahead a little bit because, you know, there's 17 bar rest there. But that's another thing too. It's like usually if there's no other percussion, like if we're just doing, which is like a COVID and a post-COVID recording thing now, it's not the whole orchestra anymore, just to keep the, you know, less people in the room. But something like this, like if there was no percussion and no timpani here for these 17 bars, they would stop and then they'd say, okay, 8 bar or 6 bar click into the 3/4. But you can hear it's just like a straight click. So when you're playing along these longer stretches, you have to really concentrate because there's no like clear downbeat. If you get off, you know, there's a little clock up in the front of the room where you see the time code and you can see like where 1 is, but it's often delayed a little bit. But yeah, you know, you have to just keep your spot, which can be a little bit stressful. Let me see if I could jump ahead right before 39 here. Yeah, so it's kind of a fun one. And, you know, you can kind of hear, you know, I can't share my screen today for some reason with for this, but I want to show you guys what I see and what I work with when I got this. And what we normally hear in our headset, we can ask for more click if we can't hear, which is often the case for something that's loud like this. They have engineers that can turn up the click sound. They can add, like there's an 1/8 note click in here also, which I can turn on, which I turned off because I don't really need it for this one, especially when I have triplets, but there's an 1/8 note click here too, if you hear this. Yeah, I can turn that on and off. I can, what often happens is the orchestra part, I don't really need to hear the orchestra part that loudly. I was just turning it up so you guys can hear it. We mostly want to just have the click so we can play our part exactly, where it's supposed to be. But sometimes the orchestra part will be like really soft and the click will be louder. That's normally what I hear. And that's probably what I did when I recorded this. And you can hear just my part. Let me mute these. What it sounds like, just for me in a small room during COVID. And so on. And it kind of has like there's some resonance, but I'm sure it's just like a kind of a clean sound in a smaller room. And then they put that in Pro Tools and they adjust it, the reverb, whatever they need for the movie or the show, but that's generally how it works, Yeah. Do we have a question here? We did that. Okay.
I'm not sure. Sorry, did you want that still up? Sorry, mate, I was on mute. Did you want that still up?
No, it's okay. Unless anybody had a question about it.
No, I think that's great. So just for a final few minutes, anyone got any further questions before we let Joe on with his day? I know he's got a rehearsal later.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, I mentioned that I teach at USC. We have this program, which we've had a few people attempt to apply, but I don't know if they got scared or what. But there's like a soloist program that's completely free.
Wow.
Yeah, it's basically, it's called the Artist Diploma, but it's basically I think a place for someone who already is establishing a solo career, who basically needs a place to practice and study a little bit more. Like they would study with me, and of course, depending on what their needs are. Like we had a marimba player try to apply once. They would study a lot with Nalco, or marimba teacher. I could bring in guest faculty, of course. So that's, if anybody's ever interested, you can contact me. Tim, you can share my email.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
that
also,
great. So is that like do you get a qualification, or it's just sort of a period of time that you get to work with everyone? Or
there's a qualification, but I think, the way I set it up because they have it for strings. Soloists come through, and I think they only accept something like 3 a year combined from the whole music school. So piano, string soloists, they're always applying and getting accepted, but it's pretty rigorous. You have to play a concerto in front of another committee of like other musicians, not just me and my colleague.
Yeah.
So percussion solo, also marimba soloist. And it's a totally free program. It's just, you don't have to be at the school all the time. It's just to support your solo career, basically. And it's all paid for diploma. The other thing is Tim and I were talking about it. I recently was asked to run a percussion studio in Valencia, Spain. It's going to be called the Mediterranean Music College in Valencia. And my idea was similar to what I talked about before when we were talking about why I chose timpani and career and timpani. My idea for the studio, they basically said, what's your ideal studio? What would it look like? And I said, well, I think we have me, who I can, do contemporary music, percussion ensemble, and timpani, of course. We need a principal percussion player. We need a percussion soloist. We need a marimba soloist, and maybe a drum set player, just for basic stuff. Mm-hmm. So the studio is going to be myself, Sam Walton, principal in the London Symphony, percussion. Colin Curry, percussion soloist. Theodore Milkov, a marimba. I don't know if you guys are aware of Theodore. He's an amazing marimba player. Yeah. And Peter Erskine drum set, and my colleague, former friend from Juilliard, Roxanne Jerkovich, who's assistant principal timpani in Barcelona. She's like the local who's going to be able to, make things run smoothly, because obviously we can't be there all the time, but we will hopefully be there as much as possible. Yeah, so just something to look out for. If anyone's interested, again, you can let me know, and it's pretty exciting studio.
Are you okay for me to share your email with everyone?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
if I normally what I do is I put it in the chat box here so people can just copy it.
Would you mind just reminding us of the name of this thing?
The school?
Yeah. What's it going to be called?
It's called the Mediterranean Music College in Valencia, or the short name is going to call it Med Music. We're going to have auditions starting already in January, February, by tape only, of course, and then supposed to start in the fall. Only undergraduate and master's degree for now. But Valencia has a lot of money for arts and culture. There's a Berklee College of Music there. I played there once with New York Phil, and the hall was really great. I remember we did Mahler 1 there. I remember. So it's exciting, and of course the faculty. So we can cover if someone wants to be soloist. We have Colin. I'm going to do the ensemble, which I also do at USC. Some conducting. And then of course we have orchestral, angle, soloist, marimba. So it's exciting. We'll see how many students we get at first, but hopefully it'll grow.
Yeah, great. All right, well, I'll just wrap this stream up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget, this weekend we've got 2 more amazing concerts, Saturday and Sunday at 8:30 UTC time. We look forward to seeing you then, and have a great day.